Ramachandra Guha is officially, I suppose, a sociologist, but we historians claim him. He is, in many respects, a pioneer of environmental history in general and in India in particular, and that is how I happen to be aware of him, because I too am an environmental historian and have found it necessary to read all of his environmental history work. But that's only a fraction of his oeuvre, because there's a whole body of work on cricket, none of which I have read, but I trust that several of you have delved deeply into it. And there is another body of work on Indian history, politics, and society in general, which has a couple of landmarks to it, one of which, published in 2007, was India After Gandhi, a big fat doorstop of a book which won a number of plaudits and prizes, which I do not have memorized, but for example, a book of the year from The Economist and The Washington Post and The Wall Street Journal and the San Francisco Chronicle, among other publications. Book of the decade, according to Times of India, Times of London, and The Hindu. He's also, in 2013 in India, 2014 here in the States, published the first volume of a two-volume biography of Gandhi. That one is called Gandhi Before India, and the second volume will be out not by this evening, but fairly soon. So you have come to hear Dr. Guha, not me. So I will just say we are delighted here at Georgetown to have in our midst a historian, sociologist, man of letters, public intellectual of the international stature of Ramachandra Guha. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Guha.
Thank you all for coming here. I'm going to speak on, the title I've given my talk is The Long Life and Lingering Death of the Indian National Congress. I'm not very good at searching for metaphors, but you could think of the Congress Party today as a senior citizen who has got terminal cancer and refuses to accept. They have gone through several rounds of chemotherapy and it hasn't seemed to have had much impact. But it refuses to die and refuses to acknowledge that it's dying. But a large part of my talk will actually be about its life. Because let's not forget that although it won a mere 44 seats in the last general election and a mere, I think, 9 seats, if I'm correct, in the most recent assembly elections to India's largest state, Uttar Pradesh, the Indian National Congress is one of the oldest and most influential political parties in the world, and also one of the most successful. The Indian National Congress led the freedom struggle against the world's most powerful empire. After India achieved independence in 1947, the Indian National Congress nurtured national unity and implanted the institutions of democracy in a large, complex, and divided and diverse country. And finally, the Indian National Congress inspired anti-colonial movements all over the world. Ho Chi Minh famously said that we are all followers of Mahatma Gandhi. Although he added that if Mahatma Gandhi had been fighting against the French, he would have abandoned non-violence within a week. But the prefatory remark was important. We are all followers of Mahatma Gandhi, whether we are communists or socialists or whatever. And sometimes this inspiration found shape in the very name of these later parties, the African National Congress. The name itself comes from the Indian National Congress. So it's a party with a remarkable history, now meeting perhaps its end. But my talk today, it was founded in 1885, so we are talking 130 odd years of history. My talk today will trace the arc of this history, its rise, maturing, and then decline, and it will divide the history into 5 phases. So this 130-year history, I'm going to divide into 5 phases. The first phase, which in my view ran from 1885, its founding in December 1885 in Bombay, to about 1905, I'm calling the Debating Club of Educated Males. So in the first phase, the Congress was a debating club of educated urban males. The common perception of the early Congress was that it was a loyalist collaborationist body, that it was loyal to the empire, that all it asked for was more Indian participation in the bureaucracy and the judiciary. So that's the common historian's perception of the Congress in its early phase, that they said, why are all the judges British? Why can't they be the odd Indian judge? Why can't there be more Indian professors? Why can't there be more universities opened up to educate Indians to serve in the colonial civil service? In a book published in 1968, the Cambridge historian Anil Seal wrote this book on the early years of the Indian Congress, and he famously said that they really were struggling for the loaves and fishes of office. Now, this is largely true, but not entirely true. While the class base of the Congress was limited, it was a party of urban males, often or mostly English educated. Its aims were also limited. It wanted greater participation in administration and the judiciary. At the same time, its ambitions were not limited. The scale of its ambitions was signaled in its very name, the Indian National Congress. It was Indian, it was national, and it was a Congress. It wanted to encompass all of India. The historian Mukul Kesavan, who's much better at metaphors than I am, having being a novelist as well as a historian, used this wonderful and resonant phrase about the early Congress. He said, the Congress was the Noah's Ark of Indian nationalism. It sought to keep every species of Indian on board. That is, Hindu, Muslim, Parsi, Gujarati, Sikh, Jain, Tamil, Kannada, Hindi speaking, Bengali, Gujarati, Odia, etc., etc. So it was the Noah's Ark of nationalism. And actually, it is this aspect of the Congress that inspired the African National Congress, because it tried to bring all the different tribes of South Africa and all the different races too on board in one composite enterprise. So that's the first phase of the Congress between 1885 and 1905, which when it was a debating club of educated males. The second phase, which runs from roughly 1905 to 1919, I am terming or categorizing this phrase as the Congress being urban males turning anti-colonial. Urban males turning anti-colonial. By the late 19th century, there was a discontent among sections of the Indian intelligentsia with polite appeals to the Congress rulers, to the colonial rulers. So you wanted more action, more militant action. You had some armed revolutionaries carrying out the occasional spectacular assassination of British officials, but very occasional assassinations. More broadly, within the Congress, you had the rise of a militant tendency. It's not enough, argued this militant tendency, to simply draft appeals to the British rulers asking for more participation in the bureaucracy, for more devolution of power. You had to resort to popular street action. And the most visible and substantial of these popular street actions was the Swadeshi movement of 1905. Hence, 1905 marks the beginning of the second phase. Swadeshi, or self-reliance, was a slogan of the militant tendency of the Congress. And here the argument was that British imperial rule had undermined economic self-reliance in India. There was an intellectual basis for this. Writers such as Dadabhai Nauroji, who was a president of the Congress and an early mentor of Gandhi and Jinnah, formulated what was called the drain theory, the drain of wealth from India. R.C. Dutt, a civil servant who left the colonial civil service, wrote a famous economic history of India documenting deindustrialization under British rule and destruction of handicrafts. And in response to this, you had the Swadeshi movement. You also had in the 19th century the growth of modern industry under Indian auspices. You had Indian capitalist enterprise, particularly in Western India, to some extent in Eastern India. But in Eastern India, the jute mills were largely controlled by the Europeans. But in Western India, the textile factories of Ahmedabad and Bombay cotton textile factories increasingly came under Indian hands. And there was the Swadeshi movement essentially asked for the boycott of foreign clothes as a fillip to indigenous enterprise in the pursuit of economic self-reliance. So you had these famous bonfires of foreign cloth. So it was street protest, it was no longer polite appeals, and it had charismatic leaders. Three in particular, known as Lal, Bal and Pal. Lajpat Rai from Punjab, Bal Gangadhar Tilak from Lala Lajpat Rai from Punjab, Lal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak from Maharashtra, Bal, and Bipin Chandra Pal from Bengal. So these are the three epicenters of this mass upsurge, Bombay and Pune and Calcutta particularly. And it was an upsurge that found reflection on the streets, in the spectacular demonstrations of protest. In literature, Tagore's great novel, The Home and the World, Ghaire Baire, later made into a film by Satyajit Ray, is inspired by the Swadeshi movement, though it also expresses Tagore's skepticism over some of the methods used. So this was a genuine popular upsurge. The Swadeshi movement of 1905 marked a distinct shift in the Congress. But even so, it was constrained by being urban. It did not penetrate in the countryside. By being male, women really didn't figure, and being upper caste. So this phase in 1907, 2 years towards the end of the Swadeshi movement, there was a famous Congress at Surat, where there was a split in the party, and the annual meeting of the Congress. Hence, this was known as the Congress because it met annually, mostly in December. The Surat Congress of 1907, there was a split between the moderates, led by Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and the extremists led by Tilak, who was at both, interestingly, from Pune. Both were Chitpavan Brahmins from Pune, both quite remarkable people, wonderful writers, both of them as well, but with opposed approaches to the political future of India. Gokhale believed that social reform was as important as political emancipation. So he was deeply concerned about the inequality of the caste system. He was concerned about the fact that women did not have access to education. And he argued that these issues of gender and caste reform must proceed simultaneously with the attempt at political freedom. Whereas Tilak said no, political freedom comes first. Swaraj is my birthright, he famously said, and social reform will come subsequently. So in 1907 there was a split. Now this was one problem that the Congress faced in its second phase, but there was a second problem. After the Swadeshi movement, the Congress, and partly because of the imagery used in the Swadeshi movement, women did not participate in the movement, but the figure of Mother India was invoked. And idioms from Hindu epics, exalting Hindu goddesses were invoked. And this alienated the Muslims. So the early Congress wanted to keep Muslims on board. And among its early presidents was a quite remarkable jurist and social reformer from Mumbai called Badruddin Taibji. But after 1905-1907, the Congress began being perceived as a Hindu party, as an upper caste party, but preeminently as a Hindu party. And in 1906, you had the formation of the Muslim League. And in 1909, the Muslim League demanded that in the limited electoral franchise held under British rule, Muslims should get separate electorates. So you had a kind of, in the second phase, although the Congress was developing a more militant focus, although it was becoming more activist, although it had some incredibly charismatic leaders, there was also a kind of increasing suspicion cast over the party as being a Hindu party. So that's phase two, that lasts from 1905 to 1919. The third phase, beginning in 1919, sees the Congress as a genuine mass movement and a nationwide organization. And this is the phase of the Gandhian Congress. From 1919 till, shall we say, 1945, till the end of the Second World War, Gandhi is the key leader of the Congress. Now, Gandhi is active well before 1919. He cuts his political teeth in South Africa, the subject of the book that John mentioned. And this month, 1917, marks the 100th anniversary of his first campaign on Indian soil, the Champaran Satyagraha. So Gandhi returns to India in 1915. He spends a year traveling around the country. And in 1917, he gets involved for the first time in mass action, fighting for the rights of indigo tenants in northern Bihar, who had been treated extremely harshly by European planters. And he succeeds in getting a revision of their tenancy agreements and moving them towards a more voluntary rather than coercive system of engagement with the planters. Then in the next year, 1918, he is active in a mill worker strike in Ahmedabad, where his ashram is. In the same year, he is also active in a peasant struggle in Gujarat against excessive taxation. So he started organizing. He had already had, of course, experience of organizing traders and professionals and indentured laborers in South Africa. Now in 1917-18, he does similar things in India. But he really becomes an all-India leader only in 1919. And this 1919 marks the birth of the third phase of the Congress, the Gandhian Congress, the Gandhi-led and directed Congress. And I will say a little bit about the ways in which Gandhi reshaped the Congress. But why 1919? 1919 is the year of Gandhi's first all-India protest, the protest against the Rowlatt Act, which was an extremely harsh piece of legislation introduced by the British. And also in 1919, you had the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh, which alienated many Indians, which really blackened the name of British rule in a way it hadn't been blackened at least since 1857. So 1919 is important. 1919 is when Gandhi launches his first All India movement on the questions of the wrongs of Punjab and the Rowlatt Act. Now, Gandhi, I'm writing the second volume of my Gandhi biography, and one of the things that strikes you when you're a biographer, it strikes you when you're a historian too, but much more when you're a biographer, is how much of a role luck plays in history. You know, pure happenstance. Gandhi comes back in 1915. Gandhi's mentor was Gokhale, who was a reformist. He was not an activist, he was a reformist who believed in social reform, who founded the Servants of India Society to promote gender and caste equality through social work. And Gokhale had hoped that Gandhi would succeed him as head of the Servants of India Society. But a month after Gandhi returns, Gokhale dies. Once Gokhale dies, Gandhi is freed from having a mentor. He can chart his own path. So Gandhi actually wants to combine the Tilak route and the Gokhale route. He wants to organize Indians for mass action against British rule without forgetting the social reform agenda of Gokhale, which included, caste and gender equality and also Hindu-Muslim unity. So he wants to do both. But if Gokhale had been alive, surely he would have put pressure on, it's like, every protege rebels against his teacher. Every son rebels against his father, and some of us are seeing that rebellion in their lives as today, right? But what happens when your protege, your mentor disappears or your father dies? You're freed. Many years ago, I wrote the biography of an extraordinary anthropologist called Verrier Elwin, who was freed by his father's death to leave the church and become an activist for tribal people. I mean, his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather had all been bishops. And he himself joined the church and became a priest. But he was disenchanted with the orthodoxy of evangelical Christianity, but daren't rebel against his father. But then the father died. Right. Now, so sometimes these things happen. And in Gandhi's case, two things happened. One is Gokhale. And Gokhale died at a time when he had profoundly influenced Gandhi for the good. I mean, he had shaped his moral consciousness. But at a time when, having shaped Gandhi's moral consciousness, he may have acted as an impediment to his future moral and political development. So Gokhale dies in 1915. Gandhi goes to Champaran, starts thinking himself of as an all-India figure. In 1919, he organizes the Satyagraha against the Rowlatt Act and the Punjab violence. And here is his second stroke of good luck. While he is organizing his first all-India campaign, Tilak is away in England. Tilak was the acknowledged leader of the militant tendency of the Congress. Had there been an all-India had Tilak been in India in 1919, he would have emerged as the natural leader of the movement against the Rowlatt Act. But it so happened that a few years previously, a British journalist had written a book on India where he'd made many nasty remarks about Tilak, and Tilak was advised or ill-advised to sue for libel in London. And the British courts are almost as slow as the Indian courts. So he spent the whole of 1919 fighting his libel case, incidentally which he lost also at the end. But meanwhile, Gandhi was making strides, organizing people against the atrocities in the Punjab and the Rowlatt Act, and become an all-India figure. So Gandhi takes over the Congress in 1919 and essentially dominates and controls it till 1946. And Gandhi saw his program as fourfold. Firstly, or fivefold actually. Firstly, achievement of political independence, of course, but as he famously said, Swaraj or freedom is like a bed with four sturdy pillars. Swaraj will be sustained by four pillars, one signifying Hindu-Muslim harmony or religious harmony more broadly, a second signifying the abolition of untouchability, a third signifying economic self-reliance, and a fourth signifying non-violence. So in the settlement of disputes, either against the British rulers or within yourselves, Indians must practice non-violence. Now, and in pursuit of Swaraj and these four aims of Swaraj, Gandhi organized four major nationwide movements. There was the Rowlatt Satyagraha, which I have mentioned. There's the non-cooperation movement of 1920 to 22. There was the Salt March of the 1930s, and there was the Quit India movement of the 1940s. And these four movements enjoyed extraordinary mass support. I've spoken about the Swadeshi movement in 1905, but the support that Swadeshi enjoyed was utterly insignificant compared with the popular support that the Gandhian struggle enjoyed across states, across all of India, across classes, peasants, workers, urban professionals, and even some industrialists who went to jail. These Gandhi struggles bridged the divide between town and country, and it brought many women and low castes into the popular movement too. So it was quite extraordinary, the social depth that the Gandhian Congress enjoyed between 1920 and 1945. It was an all-India party, it was an all-caste party, it was an all-class party. It brought many more women into the public fold than the movements of Mao, Lenin, and Ho Chi Minh, and so on and so forth, Sukarno, and so on, all the comparable movements of the time. And it brought quite a few Muslims, not enough Muslims, because eventually there was a failure on the question of partition. But where it did succeed spectacularly, and I'd like to say a little bit about this, because this is an aspect of Indian political history little known outside India, is that part of Gandhi's genius was to emphasize that when India became independent, no one language would be dominant. Unlike the United States, unlike France, unlike Poland, unlike Germany, indeed unlike Pakistan, unlike Bangladesh, unlike Sri Lanka, unlike Vietnam, unlike China, nationalism would not mean allegiance to a single language. And every major linguistic group in India would be allowed room to develop. And during the 20s and 30s, he reconstituted the Congress party on the grounds of language. So every major linguistic group, the Kannada speakers, the Tamil speakers, the Gujarati speakers, the Hindi speakers, the Bengali speakers, all had their provincial congress. And Gandhi was also, among other things, a supremely skilled propagandist. Well before the age of Twitter and so on, he was editor of a newspaper, and he recognized the linguistic pluralism of India even when he was in South Africa. In South Africa, he edited a magazine called the Indian Opinion. So he knew that to promote your message, you need your own vehicle. You need a magazine. In that, he was common with many political activists of different stripes all over the world in the 19th and early 20th century. But this is what makes Gandhi unique. Indian Opinion, his magazine in South Africa, was printed in 4 languages, in 4 scripts: English, Gujarati, Hindi, and Tamil. And when in the 20s and 30s, when he assumed charge of the Congress and transformed it into this mass fighting force, albeit fighting non-violently, the message was taken forward by the vernacular press, by the Odia newspapers, the Telugu newspapers, the Marathi newspapers, the Kannada newspapers, and so on. And the way this spread the Congress deep into the countryside, so that from the 30s onwards, not only did every state of India had a Congress organization, every district and even sub-district, what we call taluk, had a vibrant Congress organization. It had leaders, it had activists, it had intense discussions about the nation in the making. What would be the place of women? How would you abolish the caste system? What forms of economic development India would adopt when it became independent? What would be the role of science and of technology, of education, of health? So a real, embryonic social consciousness was being spread through the nationalist press. And another of Gandhi's great achievements was that he was superb at making leaders out of followers. So he had a network of colleagues, and each grew to become substantial figures. So whether it be Jawaharlal Nehru, or Vallabhbhai Patel, or C. Rajagopalachari in the south, or Rajendra Prasad in Bihar, or feminist leaders like Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, and Suchita Kriplani and Mridula Sarabhai, and so on and so forth. And these were all substantial figures who sometimes challenged him. C.R. Das, the famous Bengal congressman, disagreed with Gandhi in the 1920s. So did Motilal Nehru. Subhash Bose famously challenged him over the presidency in the 1930s and defeated Gandhi. Nehru and he had many intellectual arguments. So it was a quite extraordinary party. A party that was genuinely mass-based, that was genuinely all India, that had a very sophisticated organization, that had vehicles, institutional and popular vehicles for disseminating its message, that had debates, that had arguments, conducted all across India. Of course, it had one acknowledged great leader, for sure, but it was not as if that leader was absolutely dominant in the way some great political leaders have been later on in Indian history. So that is the third phase of the Congress, what I've called the making of a mass movement and a nationwide organization. Now I come to the fourth phase, which runs from, shall we say, 1946 to 1969, where I call the Congress a school for democracy. And partition, as I've already indicated, was a great failure of the Gandhian Congress, because they all fought for independent India. That didn't happen. And that would be why that didn't happen, and whether that could have been averted would have to be the subject of a separate discussion. But here I want to focus on what happened once partition became inevitable. At that stage, the Gandhian Congress reached out to its political rivals. So B.R. Ambedkar, the great Dalit leader who had been a fierce opponent of Gandhi in the Congress, was invited into the Congress-led cabinet and made law minister and chief draftsman of the Indian Constitution. So were other people. So were the major Sikh leader Baldev Singh. So was, the Parsi leader C.H. Bhabha and others. So it was a team of rivals, to use a phrase very popular in Washington until last year. Right. Now, this was a team of rivals, and it was conceptualized by Gandhi. And Gandhi is famously supposed to have told Nehru and Patel. You see, Nehru and Patel, who were the next generation of leaders who succeeded Gandhi, and who wanted the Congress to monopolize the spoils of power. They had led the fight for freedom. Freedom came, And why should they share power with anyone else? And Gandhi told them, freedom is coming to India and not to the Congress party. And hence this team of rivals was brought together and drafted a constitution, a visionary constitution, which committed independent India to, firstly, multi-party democracy based on universal adult franchise, which is an extremely daring and counterintuitive act because no poor, largely illiterate country, let alone one as large and as diverse as ours, had ever attempted universal adult franchise. But the Congress did so, first. Secondly, the Constitution abolished gender and caste hierarchies, although, of course, they continue to be practiced in everyday life. But again, when you think of how scriptural practice in India, both Hindu and Islamic, so rigidly codified the subjection of women, if you think of how untouchability had persisted for millennia and had again the blessing of the Hindu priesthood, it was quite daring to abolish it legislatively. It also committed India to religious pluralism. So India was not going to be a Hindu Pakistan. Statehood was not going to be defined by a single faith, and it was not going to be defined, as I've explained, by a single religion either. So the four absolutely fundamental contributions of the post-independence Congress to the building of Indian democracy were, first, multi-party democracy. I mean, it could have easily gone the way of so many regimes in post-colonial Asia and Africa. I mean, you think of what happened to Ghana or Nigeria or Indonesia or Mexico, where the party in power refused to share power with anyone else. We don't want free and fair elections. People like Nehru knew that one day they would lose. So what? Every Indian must have the right to vote. So that was the first quite extraordinary, brave, visionary act of the post-independence Congress. The second was, as I said, at least legislatively, seeking to transform a deeply unequal, inegalitarian, hierarchical, feudal society towards one, at least when it came to the statute book, was more consistent with equality, freedom, and justice. Thirdly, insisting that we would not, although we were a majority Hindu nation, we would not be a Hindu state. And fourthly, and in many ways, quite remarkably, not privileging a single national language. And again, for those of you who are not Indian, or those of you who are Indian but too young to remember this, let me tell you that India is one because India does not have one language. Pakistan was created on the basis of Islam and divided when Urdu was imposed on East Pakistan. Sri Lanka has been engaged in a bloody civil war for more than 3 decades because the Sinhala speakers of the south will not allow the Tamil speakers of the north equal parity. So that is how extraordinary, revolutionary and far-seeing this act of the Congress was. And when I say that the Congress was a school for democracy in those decades from 1947 to 1969, it also practiced democracy within. It continued to be what it was in the 20s and 30s, a party with robust state units and leaders. So state chief ministers, the chief ministers of the Congress chief ministers of major provinces were substantial figures. Kamaraj in Tamil Nadu, Y.B. Chavan in Maharashtra, B.C. Roy in Bengal, Hari Krishna Mahatab, and later Biju Patnaik in Orissa. And I could go on with all these names. They're substantial figures. And they themselves did not rule it over their ministry or their legislators. It was debate, give and take, argument. You had active district committees, state committees, national committees. The Congress president often was not Nehru's choice. Sometimes it was, but sometimes it wasn't. So that's the fourth phase, a school for democracy. This is the phase perhaps least appreciated by historians. And the fifth phase, the last phase, which is from 1969 till today. And before I tell you my term that encapsulates the fifth phase, let me tell you my terms for the first four: debating club of educated males, urban males turning anti-colonial, mass movement nationwide organization, a school for democracy, and from 1969, the Congress is a family firm. And this phase has lasted almost half a century. It starts in 1969 when Indira Gandhi, who had more or less accidentally become Prime Minister in 1966, seeking to control her party and marginalize her opponents, splits the party, takes a leftward turn, purely instrumentally. I don't believe she had read Das Kapital, and probably no other socialist work either. But purely instrumentally, she rebrands herself as a messiah of the poor to outflank the conservative leaders, old guard of the party, nationalizes the banks, abolishes the privy purse of the princes, and coins the slogan Garibi Hatao, abolish poverty, to fight the elections. And for almost half a century now, a single family has dominated the party. With only a brief interregnum between 1997 and 1998, that is, after Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated and before Sonia Gandhi entered politics. Now, this dominance of a single party, I beg your pardon, this dominance of a single family over a major party for so long is unique among the major democracies of the world. It hasn't happened in the United States, though it's been tried. And you should be glad, at least nothing else, one reason why Trump won, one of the things that positively can be said about Trump in the election is that A. Clinton lost. And I say that as an Indian who wishes America well, right? It hasn't happened in Britain. It hasn't happened in Germany. It hasn't happened in Australia. It hasn't happened in France. You've had people, fathers, sons, mothers, daughters. It's happened in the region to some extent. I mean, of course, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. But in the large, major, established democracies of the world, this is unique. The control of a single family over a major and at times dominant party. So we need to ask the question, why was the family successful for so long? So I've got to ask this question. Why, from 1969 to today, has the Congress been dominated by a single party? Why was the family successful for so long? And I've got to outline 4 reasons. First, the sense among the electorate and the citizenry more broadly that the members of the Nehru-Gandhi family were genuinely all India leaders, rising above caste, religious and linguistic markers. Others were identified as being from a certain state, belonging to a certain religion, a certain caste. But Indira Gandhi and onwards, Indira Gandhi embodied an all India perspective. She was claimed by everyone or by no one. That was true also of Rajiv and to some extent of Sonia. So that's the first sense, that the members of the family were generally all India leaders. Secondly, and they thought and cared for the country as a whole. They wouldn't privilege the interests of a certain section based on some marker of language or caste or religion. Second, the second reason the family has been successful so long is the sense that it has sacrificed a great deal for the nation. Jawaharlal Nehru spent 13 years in jail. Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi were both assassinated, for things they had done while they being leaders. So they paid a horrific cost. So this sense that they had sacrificed a great deal for the nation. The third reason, possibly accounting for the continuing success of the family, is that the policies of the individual leaders were often appealing to broad swathes of the electorate. So these leaders had a kind of captivating election manifesto, Garibi Hatao. And how Garibi Hatao arose is also actually quite interesting. Because in 1971, there was an all-party grand alliance against Indira Gandhi's Congress. And one of the ill-advised members of this grand alliance coined the slogan, Indira Hatao, get rid of Indira. And she said, wo kehte hain Indira Hatao, main kehti hu Garibi Hatao. Incidentally, this slogan was copied by Narendra Modi not long ago in UP, but that's a separate question. Because as has famously been said, in India there is no copyright. In India, copyright means the right to copy. Anyway, so Indira Gandhi had Garibi Hatao. Rajiv Gandhi had also a compelling vision, a vision of technological modernity. We used to mock the fact that he brought computers into India in 1984. Right? We thought it would throw people out of work. But he said, I'm going to bring India in the 21st century. And many young people thought, here's a young leader, dynamic, sympathetic to science and technology, aspirations of the young. And Sonia Gandhi too had a a political philosophy that appealed to large sections of people. It was about the last person, the last man, that you'd had 15 years of economic liberalization. It had led to tremendous economic growth. It created a burgeoning middle class. It had unleashed entrepreneurial energies, but many people had been left out. What about the agricultural worker? What about the Adivasi? What about the peasant? So you had her programs, rural employment guarantee, food subsidy, right to information. So these three leaders could sell something to the electorate. And fourthly, a fourth reason for the success of the family for so long is that, particularly while in power, the Nehru-Gandhi family appropriated to itself the achievements and credibility of the Congress. So, in their projection of modern Indian history, family equals Congress equals nation. And the only exception was Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was the only other Congress leader, past or present, who was ever praised. So the contributions of Bose, Patel, Kamaraj, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, Rajaji, and hundreds of others were ignored. So it was as if, that was how the family was projected. So, but there was some real and credible reasons for the family's enduring success in being able to rule not just the Congress, but to rule the government in New Delhi for so long. The sense that they were all India figures, that they had sacrificed a great deal for the nation, and at least that some of them had visionary social and public policies. But having asked the question, why was the Congress so successful? Oh, I beg your pardon. Why was a single family so successful in dominating India's preeminent political party for so long? We need to ask a complementary question. Why has the Congress declined so spectacularly at state and now national levels? Why is it that I'm speaking of having given you the long life? Why is it that I'm speaking of the lingering death of the Congress? How did the Congress fall from 206 to 44? How did the Congress reach a stage when, although all its major prime ministers, except for Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao, were from UP, it has 9 seats in UP? How is it that it's been out of power in West Bengal now for 40 years? The state that gave the Congress, the state of Rabindranath Tagore, Subhash Bose, Chittaranjan Das, Bipin Chandra Pal, B.C. Roy, Siddharth Shankare. Why is it in Maharashtra it looks like it's been in Gujarat, the state of Mahatma Gandhi and Vallabhbhai Patel? Who knows if it'll ever come back to power? It's been out of power almost 17, 18 years now. No, more than 25 years now. So, though it steadily declined at the state level and then has now collapsed at the national level, and actually the decline at the state level preceded the decline at the national level. So why is it that it's fallen so spectacularly? Here again, there are several reasons I'd like to place before you to explain the steady, continuing, and in my view, irreversible decline of the Congress party. First, it is now 70 years since independence, and no one has any personal memories of the Congress's sacrifices during the freedom struggle. You could tell me, born in 1958, and you remember Nehru. I saw him once, and his photo was always in our house. So you could tell me about all the great deeds of the Congress freedom fighters. I can't tell my son or my daughter. All they see is, corruption and cronyism. That's what Congress is. So what? Who knows what they sacrificed? And of course, that narrative is also now contested about who really contributed to the freedom struggle. So it's a long time, and since the Congress won us independence. A second reason for the Congress decline is what we may call long-term anti-incumbency. Having been in power for so long, the Congress has attracted a sustained increasing challenge and criticism from opposition parties. As early as 1949, the anthropologist, very relevant, whom I've already mentioned, remarked that, I quote, "Khadi," that is homespun, "Khadi, once the symbol of insurgents against British rule, is now an official uniform, the sign of authority and power." And by the 70s, if not, at least by the 90s, if not earlier, the khadi worn by congressmen, khadi famously described by Jawaharlal Nehru as the livery of freedom. By at least the 1980s, khadi worn by the congressmen had come to stand for corruption and cronyism and nothing else. A third reason for the decline of the Congress is the growth of a younger generation of Indians that despises social entitlement and valorizes individual achievement. You know, the three building blocks of Indian society historically have been caste, family, and kinship. Which caste do you come from? Who was your father? And who's your brother or your son? Caste, family, and kinship. Now, this matters less and less in the India of today. Younger Indians despise social entitlement and more and valorize individual achievement. This generation of voters ask what you have done, not who your father or mother was. Fourth reason for the decline of the Congress would be the high command culture of the Congress under Indira Gandhi and subsequently. So, in Nehru's time, if there was an election in Karnataka and the Congress won a majority, the legislature of the state assembly would nominate the chief minister, would elect a chief minister, the most popular local leader. But from the 1970s and through Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, it would be the high command, that is one of the members of the Gandhi family and their key confidants in Delhi, known as the high command, who would decide who would be most loyal, most pliable, who had, and so on. And this led to the atrophying of state units. So, why should you work energetically to bring your party to power if you don't know whether you'll enjoy the fruits of power, whether you can actually become an administrator? And the fifth reason for the decline of the Congress is, and I'm not mincing any words here because I don't need to, is the manifest political incompetence of the latest member of the family. Rahul Gandhi is the first member of his family not even to command the respect of his party men. Sonia Gandhi was respected. Rajiv Gandhi was respected and sometimes people had affection for him. Indira Gandhi was respected, also feared, but certainly respected. And Jawaharlal Nehru, of course, towered among all of them, right? But here is a member of his family who is not, everyone knows that he's incompetent. He's a politically incompetent chap, but he's there. Now, this last factor is not insignificant, Rahul Gandhi's political incompetence, but I don't believe it's definitive. I believe the other reasons are more important. The length of time since independence, so that we don't remember what the Congress once stood for, the many decades in power that have corrupted its fiber, the growth of a younger generation of Indians that does not care who your father or mother was, the high command culture, these are much more important in the decline of the Congress. So even if Priyanka Gandhi was to replace Rahul Gandhi, the Congress cannot revive. Both history and society are against it. Now, I want to end by reminding you once more of the long history of the Congress. The Congress, I believe, is close to extinction. I also believe that given its recent record, it probably deserves to die. But while it continued its slow, lingering, almost interminable death, let's not forget that while it lived and while it thrived, the Congress nurtured the elements of a pluralist democracy that have outlived the Congress. And if I was to describe the political contest in India today, this will be my last comment. An India today in which you have one massively dominant party, where you have one massively dominant leader, a party and a leader that are determined not just to crush all political opposition, of course you must, that's the job of a political party to win, but also to subordinate and subjugate all intermediate institutions, which includes the judiciary, the bureaucracy, the civil service, the media, to it. The battle today in India, why we are still a democracy, and why, despite various premonitions of the emergency and all, which I believe are wild hyperbole. Why we will survive as a democracy is because the Congress is dead or dying. The regional parties are fragmented. They are also corrupt. They are highly personalized. The battle today is between right-wing populism on the one side and the constitutional legacies left behind by Jawaharlal Nehru and B.R. Ambedkar. So it's only the posthumous legacy of Jawaharlal Nehru and B.R. Ambedkar, who were then within the Congress-led government, which are keeping authoritarianism in check. Thank you very much.
So we have the space for about a half an hour more. Dr. Guha, I'm sure, will be willing to take a few questions. Would you like me to recognize your interrogators?
I'll do it.
Good.
Just tell me when to shut up.
I will do so.
And I have a microphone back here for
So everybody has a
questions.
mic. So who's going to ask it? Yeah, at the back, yeah. Good, yeah.
So my question is about appropriation of symbols that were originally associated with the Congress. And so how far would you agree with the fact that the BJP has managed to successfully appropriate and then reinterpret the symbols that were once associated with the Congress?
Yeah.
For example, you spoke about the imagery of Mother India. Then we saw the political tug of war with Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who is being deified by Modi, and also to the extent that public welfare schemes, which were earlier named after either Nehru or Gandhi or Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi, and airports, now these schemes are being named after other people. In that sense, Congress has lost out on holding on to symbols that kept it powerful or kept it meaningful.
And the Congress is entitled to blame for it because it perverted and diminished those symbols. I mean, Sardar Patel was a Congress leader. When there was a Gujarat election in 2007, and I remember telling a congressman I knew, Sonia Gandhi had announced that there would be some new if they won, there would be a health insurance scheme for women. And I remember telling this congressman, I said she should name it for Patel. Modi was not speaking of Patel in 2007, he was speaking about Golwalkar, right? And it was named for Rajiv Gandhi. When the new sea link was opened in Mumbai, over which some of you have travelled, why wasn't it named after Y.B. Chavan? When the new airport was started in Hyderabad, why wasn't it named after, Narasimha Rao? So it is because in Sonia Gandhi's mind and in Rahul Gandhi's mind, this is their understanding of history. And partly it comes from Indira Gandhi, but they've intensified it, right? So it's entirely responsible. But there's a larger answer to your question, which I'd like to reflect on. Many years ago, the American philosopher Richard Rorty wrote a book called Achieving Your Country. I don't know how anyone here has read that book? Achieving Your Country. Read it. It's again relevant in this country today. But it's also relevant in my country. It must have come out 20 years ago, or maybe 25. And he talked about, he used a very interesting phrase. In that book, he used a phrase about the American left. He said the American left is anti-patriotic. Now the Indian left is even more anti-patriotic. The Indian left always loves a country, except that it's not India. It used to be Russia, then it was China, then it was Vietnam, then it became Cuba, then finally ended up with Venezuela. Right? And one of the two reasons why the BJP has been able to appropriate the symbols of nationalism, although they took no part in the freedom struggle. One is that the Indian left is anti-patriotic. The Indian communists. There's also a subtle distinction between communists and socialists. Socialists now tragically are dead. I mean, the only credible socialist left in India today is also the only halfway decent politician, who is Nitish Kumar, but who's confined to a small part of India and never grow from there. Indian socialists like Jayaprakash Narayan and Kamala Devi, but the communists who became dominant intellectually, they ran the universities. They were in power in West Bengal and Kerala. For them, some other country came before India, always. The country changed depending on where you were in the communist spectrum, right? So they ceded this space to the left, to the right. And the Congress, which could also have claimed it, it just became the property of one family. Let me tell an anecdote I've never told in public before, but it's several years later, right? So in about 2012 or 13, I had been critical of the Congress for a very long time. So Rahul Gandhi said he wanted to meet me. So he sent word to an intermediary, and he said, Mr. Guha is very critical of my writings, our policies, and I'd like to meet him. And someone had told him before the elections 1 year, reach out to intellectuals. So I said, fine. And I specified only one condition, which was that I would not go to his office. It would be in a neutral venue. We met in a hotel. And he has immaculate manners. He's well groomed. He's well spoken. He has immaculate manners. But he does not even know the history of his party. Forget the complexity of our country. That's okay. I mean, that's a different. He has not studied in Georgetown or in, Ashoka University. So forget all that. But, he's telling me, I was telling him. He said, and very polite, extremely well. He said, Mr. Guha, you're very critical. What should we do to revive the Congress? What should we do? So I said, first thing, Sonia Gandhi should stop being president of the Congress. He was like gobsmacked. I said, look, do you know that Mahatma Gandhi was president of the Congress once? Nehru was president, I think, 3 times. Sonia Gandhi has been president for the last 17 years, continuously. And get someone else, who doesn't matter who it is, get from some other part of India, some other name. That's how, you cannot have, you can have businesses that are family firms. You can't have political parties that are family firms. Right? So, first he was gobsmacked, then he heard me out. Then his answer was to educate me about the history of the Congress. And this is how his education proceeded. Mr. Guha, you don't understand. You see, you don't understand the Congress. No. See, Mr. Guha, you see, the Congress has always needed an arbiter to hold it together. First there was Gandhiji, then there was Panditji, then there was my grandmother, then there was my father, now there's my mother, and what he left unspoken was, next day will be me. Right. Now, here is a person who hasn't heard of Tilak, of Gokhale, of Sarojini Naidu, of Maulana Azad, of J.B. Kriplani. At the Congress, the only exception is Gandhiji. First there was Gandhiji, then there was Panditji, then there was my grandmother. Now, you please tell me. So, obviously, who can have any sympathy for the Congress? And given that kind of opposition, as is famously said, I've quoted someone I know in the Congress. Let me quote someone I know in the BJP, who told me about a year ago, and it's still true. He said, in 2019, both so-called national parties will have the same slogan. The Congress will say, elect us and you will have Rahul Gandhi as Prime Minister. And the BJP will say, elect them and you will have Rahul Gandhi as Prime Minister. All right, okay. Now, so my point is, but broadly speaking, the space of, patriotism is something you must avow. What Gandhi taught us, and of course what Nehru also practiced, and so did others, was to love your country. You do not have to be a Hindu. You do not have to speak Hindi, and you do not have to hate Pakistan. And you can still love your country. Indira Gandhi had it. One of the things Indira Gandhi had was a profound knowledge of the social and cultural diversity of this country. I don't think Rahul Gandhi can tell you the difference in my state between the Malnad, which is the coast, and old Mysore in the south, or the Hyderabad, Karnataka in the north. Indira Gandhi would have known it. About my state, she's from Kashmir, and she would have known it. Absolutely. So, this love for your land is diversity, and identification also with all its troubles. That is true patriotism. And the left has abandoned it. And so has the Congress, and the BJP claims it. That's, sorry to give you a long answer, and a despairing answer, but unless you reclaim this ground in a credible way, if Rahul Gandhi thinks the history of the Congress is 5 people, how can they claim to know anything? How can they claim to be nationalistic? Can't be done. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll come to you in a minute. I'll come to you in a minute. Yeah.
Take 2 at a time.
I agree with you that the topics India has hold as sort of its medals of honor, like separation of the executive and judiciary and free speech. All these are suddenly emerging in the media. But don't you think, like in such a nation with such a vast population of uneducated people, populism is the only way of unifying a country as a whole, and it's sort of a necessary vice of an emerging leader?
Well, it depends on. I'm not sure anything is necessary in politics or inevitable in politics. There's the politics of hope and there's the politics of fear. In 1951-52, we were much poorer. Much poorer. We were much more uneducated. We are now about 80% educated. We had been totally scarred by partition. And you just read Jawaharlal Nehru's speeches of 1951-52 and how the Congress won a supreme majority. Even go back to 2014 and what Modi campaigned on and comparing what's happening now. So I don't think that is necessarily true. It may be, and again, politics is about, and in many ways, Modi actually mirrors Indira Gandhi because he wants to obliterate anything that stands between him and even the party wants to dominate, and of course the government. But institutions, intermediate institutions are critical. I mean, on demonetization, for example, right? I didn't comment because I don't understand economics. But I finally wrote one column which made this point. Very few Indian institutions are credible, public institutions. There are four. Those are the army, the judiciary, the election commission, and the Reserve Bank of India. Now there are three are left. Right. Now, so I'm in that sense a liberal. I'm not a populist. I can see why people adopt populist techniques and slogans, but the residue and the damage they leave, outlives the populist in power. So I don't believe that fear is necessary to win elections. And Modi himself, the difference between his campaign in 2014 and now is striking. You want the mic? Where's the mic is coming here? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Guha. I've been teaching a modern South Asia course here, and so it's been very, very useful for my students to hear this. But one of the things that strikes me when you're listening to the final phase of the Congress is the fact that so much of what we saw in the 80s and the 90s that we associate with sort of BJP extremism was all incubated in the Congress. So Indira Gandhi basically destroying party structure and making everything coming out of the PMO's office. The emergency, the pogroms against the Sikhs after her assassination. So the Congress has literally incubated every political strategy that the BJP uses now.
That's true.
So if we are going to start to think
Indira Gandhi Congress.
Indira Gandhi's Congress.
Which is only one of 5 phases in the Congress. Let me remind you.
Certainly. But certainly the most recent.
The most recent.
And the most damaging.
Yeah.
So if we're going to start to think about, well, if India as a democracy in the sense that you're talking about is going to survive, then there needs to be at least a revival of faith in the public institutions of democracy. Now, how do we go about doing that without at least maybe doing an autopsy of a still dying Congress?
No, I agree. You're absolutely right. I mean, all that you mentioned, I said, it's from Indira Gandhi's playbook that much of this, and to some extent Rajiv Gandhi also. And I would add to the list your list, which I agree with. What Rajiv Gandhi did, though he started on this promise of technological modernization I spoke of, he first overruled the Shah Banu case, placating the Muslim fundamentalists, and immediately after that opened the locks in the Ayodhya temple, placating the Hindu fundamentalists. So this polarizing thing also comes from there. And that's part of the burden they have to live with. It's in some ways, I mean, I wrote a column after the UP elections. I didn't comment on the UP elections. But I wrote a column which may interest some of you, which is a kind of an autopsy, not of the Congress, but it was a political obituary of Sonia Gandhi, and an assessment of her political career. And it's, she's an incredibly interesting figure. In fact, her rise to power is as unlikely as Barack Obama's. If you look at, it's a great subject for a biographer. But in many ways, she's a tragic figure because she anointed her son. But I think she had a sense of, she had a much fuller understanding of India than either her husband or her son. And also she was more dialogic than her mother-in-law. Actually, she didn't have that. She had other problems. She had loyalists and all. But that whole thing, she could have, this fatal kind of Indian, some would say Italian, I would say Indian, tendency to hand over everything to your son. Right. Now, had made us forget actually some things she tried to do. including reaching out to the opposition on the women's reservation bill. It would have been a revolutionary piece of legislation that happened. But overall, you're absolutely right. I mean, the destruction of institutions, the curbs on the press, this pogrom against the Sikhs. I mean, the other day someone was asking me. That was one reason Narendra Modi could not be criticized for 2002 is that 1984 was 18 years earlier. And the same justification had been used by Rajiv Gandhi, and it had been used to win the elections and so on and so forth. So there's another reason to say that Congress should just go. I mean, for various people think it can be revived without the family, and so on and so forth. But something else, see, the thing, why I'm not despairing about Indian democracy, I'll tell you why. Though institutions are declining, I'll tell you why I'm not despairing. For several reasons. One is that you still have those institutions that are fighting back to some extent. The other is you have a younger generation that will see through some of this. I think young people are, especially the more India urbanizes, some of the sectarianism will lose its rough edges. And finally, I think, we have for the first time what we never had in the past, which is a very active civil society. And, we had first-rate public institutions, but apathetic civil society. Because, basically, a functioning democracy needs good public institutions, but also an active civil society. But Nehru was unchecked because everyone venerated him, right? And now there is an active civil society. So I think we'll kind of carry on. We'll have the same. I mean, essentially, India will always face multiple crises. But I don't believe that in the short term, or maybe in the medium term, they will become overwhelming. Because I've seen, not only have I studied how these crises, they've always been crises, and we sort of found a way around them. But of course, this will cause damage, quite a lot of damage in the short term. But the other ways in which India is becoming more democratic, despite all of this. The two ways I would stand by. Slowly, haltingly, incrementally, but India is becoming more democratic in two ways. One, that there is a slow but steady delinking of caste from occupation. And also a slow but steady delinking of family from marriage. It's slow. But once men and women, boys and girls are allowed to choose their career regardless of what their father or mother did, once young women are allowed to choose their romantic partner regardless of what, these are roots to democratization. This is happening. So I said, you have to look at it in a sense, maybe this is the sociologist in me coming out. So I look at social change that way. But clearly the political climate is not a happy one. The party political climate is not a happy one. Yeah. I'll come to it. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Guha. This was excellent. You captured the arc of the Congress's history beautifully. But while this lingering death of Congress party is happening, two particular, what I notice is two different phenomena happening with the BJP or the so-called right within the Indian political structure. One is by osmosis, they're gaining some of the key leaders and the stalwarts of the Congress themselves. I mean, we've been seeing it since 2014, even until recently with S.M. Krishna. The other thing is, and particularly with the UP election, the message, the campaign promises were significantly, I wouldn't say socialist, but they were more social, they had the tendencies and features of socialism. How much do you think these, here's my question. Do you think that the BJP, given the expansion within its party and within its membership, do you foresee some kind of split happening within the so-called right, where the one section of the BJP will try to replace the vacuum left behind by Congress party, assuming Congress completely disappears out of that?
That can't happen. That can't happen. The BJP today is very much like the Congress was in the 50s and 60s. Dominant, but not hegemonic. It's dominant everywhere. It's a major national party because where people are flocking to it. It happened to the Congress too. I mean, the socialists left and joined the Congress, and for example. So because it's the winning party, and who wants to work under Rahul Gandhi? I mean, the man who won BJP for Assam, Hemendra Biswa Sarma, said this. He said, I went to meet Rahul Gandhi to tell him of the problems of Assam Congress, and he spent his time playing with his dog and not listening to me. Right. So this will happen. And Amit Shah is ruthless. He believes in bringing anyone on board. He doesn't look at their pedigree, their record, their morality, their probity, none of that. He just says, better we have them inside the tent. So a split will not happen. Because I think, at least in the short term, if UP had turned out differently, perhaps. But what is interesting also, not only is the BJP is not just replicating the Congress in its All India presence, it's also replicating it in its high command culture. So that in 20 or 30 years, if every appointment is decided by two people in Delhi, that could create a pushback in the state units. But it'll take time. I mean, the fact is that you can't see anything but BJP dominance for the next 5, 10, maybe even 15 years. Yeah. Yeah.
To his, it sort of is about the voices of the left and the center. Where do you see them going? Do you see them coming up in just an activist voice, or do you see sort of a newer space like AAP coming up in Delhi, something similar happening in other states, or where do you see that voices?
The voices are there. Where will they go? I hesitate, because as a historian, I'm very cautious. I don't want to become an astrologer. Although I'll make a lot more money, right, if I was to become an astrologer, surely. But I don't, I'm cautious as to where it'll go. I think the left also is in terminal decline. It's too long. I mean, that is the communist left. I mean, if in 2017, 70 years of Indian independence, and your 4 portraits of your party Congress are 2 Germans, 2 dead Germans, Marx and Engels, and 2 dead Russians, Lenin and Stalin, and you're the Communist Party of India. Now, please tell me, how can you ever get... So, Aam Aadmi Party had promise, but the megalomania of its leader has undermined its expansion. It's still, I'm glad it's there in Punjab. But I think, like the Congress in the 50s and 60s, the Congress, when it was dominant, had no real party challenger. But it had intellectuals criticizing it, it had the press, it had regional leaders. You'll have Nitish Kumar, you'll have Mamta, you'll have, people in South India. So it continued to be a variegated space. Though I'm sure that the BJP won't be in power forever. Something will happen and it will unravel. What form that will take, I really can't predict. That's tough for me to predict. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Professor Guha. If we look at economic data over the past 20 years, many policies of the Congress have been quite successful, right? So you look at Narega, raising rural wages, consumption levels in rural India have been moving faster than urban India under the Congress regime. And economists scratch their heads and say, why don't they get returns at the ballot box? Like, do they miscommunicate? Or is it that the BJP, because in the era of decentralization, is able to take credit for a lot of these policies? So that's because many policies, the rights-based legislation, right to school, right to information, were perceived very well at the kind of grassroots level, but at the ballot box.
Yeah. No, I think both. I mean, both the answers you provided are there. That the BJP, because the BJP rules many states. For example, I mean, from what I know, you correct me, Chhattisgarh and to some extent Madhya Pradesh have done a good job of the PDS scheme and Manrega. And Rajasthan. But those are BJP, so they will claim credit, although the money comes from the center, the vision was, the National Advisory Council of Sonia Gandhi. That's one thing. The other is miscommunicate. Why not celebrate Narasimha Rao? Even Narasimha Rao is the appropriate of the BJP, right? Why not celebrate Narasimha Rao? So, Patel, I mean to say, so I think this whole obsession with one family, a large-hearted person would say, let me make one comment to cricket here. I mean, which is, Virat Kohli. One of the appealing things about him, I mean, he has a rather, he's a colorful way with words, but let that be. But one of the appealing things about him, compared to many Indian captains in the past, is that he's always generous about his teammates. And he missed a test match, and his vice captain won it for India, and he said the vice captain and he named 1 or 2 tactical decisions that the stand-in captain had taken and said how fantastic they were. No, that's the way to communicate a proper message. Sonia Gandhi should listen to Virat Kohli speak. It's too late now, sadly. Okay, but so both of them, I think both of them have played a role. That you're right. Many of these liberalization, social welfare schemes, right to information are all from the Congress. But even GST now, which is about to go through, it comes from them. But they just haven't been able to do it. Yeah. And I'll come to it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guha. One of the most interesting comments that I saw after the elections was Dr. Tharoor said that the decay or the decline of the Congress in 2014 was similar to the post-emergency elections in which Indira Gandhi had a massive loss. You obviously disagree.
That's rubbish.
But I just...
That's rubbish.
Yeah.
Indira Gandhi won the whole South. She won the whole South in 1977, right? They had 200 odd seats. I mean, that is a good, loyal party man trying to console himself and his colleagues. That's what it is, right? Obviously, how can it be? I mean, that's the hope you take. You cut at straws. Sonia Gandhi says the same thing. Sonia Gandhi says, my mother-in-law fought back and my son will also fight back, right? But in 1977, the Congress swept the South. Swept the South. It really lost in UP and Bihar. It lost 85 seats in UP, all 85 in UP and all 54 in Bihar. That's how it lost, right? So there's absolutely no comparison, zero. Even if, forget at the level of leadership, at the level of objective facts, there's no comparison. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Guha, for the wonderful talk again. Question that I had in mind, given the current context of Indian politics, is the Muslim vote and the Uniform Civil Code, triple talaq issues that keep on coming up.
Yes.
And you read out a history of India with pluralistic democracy. Do you think, given the rise of the BJP, they can really enforce that uniform agenda in the next years? Or will the public institutions give them a backlash? Or the Indian public, at least, will rise up to the issue of making India into what somebody like Yogi Adityanath or Amit Shah represents? In legislative forms, at least, Uniform Civil Code.
I think there's a double crisis in India today, which is that Hindu liberalism has been vanquished by Hindu radicalism, and that the Muslims have adopted a siege-like mentality. I mean, they've ceded their leadership to their clergy, partly because the Congress patronized the reactionary elements, partly, with the Iraq war and the feeling of insecurity globally and so on. So it's a very complicated scenario. It's troubling. Again, that will be another lecture, the state and fate of Hindu-Muslim relations in India. In 1950, from 1949 till 1956, when Ambedkar and Nehru tried to promote equality for Hindu women, the RSS totally opposed it. So it's very rich for the RSS now to be claiming to speak for gender equality, right? Okay, now all of us can change our minds, we can grow and so on, that's fine, right? Rajiv Gandhi in the 1980s was in a position to bring about a common civil code. And again, had he known what Ambedkar and Nehru stood for, he'd done it, because the moment then was ripe. Today, firstly, I don't think the BJP uses it to something to taunt the Muslims. They think the Muslims don't like it, or the Muslim clergy don't like it. So I think many Muslim women will happen. I mean, any sensible person should be happy if triple talaq is abolished and polygamy is abolished. Full stop. I wish they do it. I would support them. Although I'll be trolled for a change by leftists on Twitter, I'm happy. Absolutely, of course. I don't like the word uniform civil code, common civil code, gender. But there's a way in which you could. But the first step would be absolutely bring in legislation abolishing Pakistan has abolished the triple talaq. Many Indians don't know this. Absolutely. So it is used. Again, it's similar to nationalism that we talked about. The BJP can speak the language of gender equality because the Congress has abdicated it. Right. So, but if these two things are brought in, surely, I mean, any sensible Indian would support it. Yeah.
Our last question.
This lady.
Thank you, Dr. Guha. I'm a student at American University, and I'm working with my professor, Dr. Akbar Ahmed, who's a Muslim scholar and has written extensively about Jinnah. We're working on a play about Jinnah and Gandhi.
Okay.
And since you've written so extensively about Gandhi, I wanted to ask you, what are some gems of knowledge that we can include in the play that would help building bridges?
Sure. I'll tell you one, which is a discovery of mine, which is in my book Gandhi Before India. All right. Now, which is a modest discovery, but I'm proud of it. in 1897, if you go to my book Gandhi Before India, you look at it. In 1897, Gandhi and Jinnah were in correspondence. Gandhi's entry book tells us that they were in correspondence. Gandhi was then in Durban in 1897. They were in correspondence, and we don't know the content of the letters, but we know some things. We know that Gandhi was the only Indian lawyer in South Africa. We know that the majority of his clientele were Gujarati. We know that the majority of them were Gujarati Muslim. And we know that he wanted another lawyer, so there were two lawyers, one Hindu, one Muslim, to speak for the Gujarati expatriates in South Africa. We know all this. We also know that in 1897, Jinnah was in Bombay and his legal career was going nowhere. So he may have welcomed an invitation from Durban to join Gandhi in partnership. This is 50 years before the nations were divided, right? So please use this in your play. If Gandhi and Jinnah had set up a legal partnership in Durban in 1897, what would the world have looked like? How much time? Yeah, some of the back, yeah. One last question. Last question. You're ready for some time. Last question.
Thanks for taking my question. So I know you're a big fan of Rajagopalachari. So I was wondering if you think there's a Rajagopalachari like figure in the Congress that you'd think. So he came into the Congress in the 50s, right? He wanted an opposition to Nehru.
He was a remarkable person. His one weakness, of course, that he was not a mass leader. So let me tell you this, since you asked. He was a thinker, and he was a brave and principled critic, both of Gandhi in the 30s and 40s and of Nehru in the 50s and 60s. Brave and principled. That is, he never let his criticism come in the way of his personal affection for those two men. And he recognized that even when he was opposing Nehru, Nehru also stood for the good of India in a different way from him, and so on. Right. Now, there are people in the Congress today, I won't name them because I'll get them into trouble, who are very intelligent. I mean, the intellectual caliber of Indian politicians has declined. But if you keep that decline in mind, there's at least one, maybe more than one, but at least one, maybe more than one figure in the Congress party today who, by the standards of 2017, is as intelligent, as astute, as far-seeing, and in the Congress, as Jawaharlal Rajagopal is. But he does not have the guts to tell Rahul Gandhi what he thinks. Why that is, that's what makes Rajagopal special, right? But they are these people, so it would require someone, Rajagopalachari wrote an essay in 1956, which is accepted in my anthology Makers of Modern India, wanted a constructive opposition while he was still in the Congress party. So actually, maybe it's the BJP that needs the Rajagopalachari, right? So someone who sees the dangers of unbridled authoritarianism. Yashwant Sinha is probably too old. He would be a likely candidate because he's done something enormously admirable in recent months for which he's not got credit, which is to try and build bridges with the separatists in Kashmir. And Modi has shunned him totally, which is very sad and tragic. Look at what's happening in Kashmir today, 6% voter turnout. I mean, 3 months ago, Yashwant Sinha went to the valley, and Modi should really have encouraged that, right? So maybe it's because the Congress is finished, let them be, let them be. Their history, that's it. But I think, following on your question, probably what the BJP needs is a Rajagopalachari-like figure. But there too, you may have people of intelligence, but to take on Gandhi and then to take on Nehru, it requires colossal moral courage. If you're on the same side as them and you do it publicly. Rajagopalachari took on Gandhi twice. One on a personal issue, for which you'll have to read my biography when it comes out. And the other, which is well known, which is his opposition to the Quit India movement. And he said he was prophetic. He said the Muslims will benefit and partition will happen. Right. So it requires that kind of courage. But I think it's a lovely question you've raised. But I think it's the BJP that needs a Rajagopalachari. For the good of India, that's what we need. Yeah.